I think when you think about Jesus, like we were talking about emotions, right? So we think of Jesus like of having it all together and not having it because he was perfect. He didn't have these emotions. He didn't have these feelings. And so as I studied trauma, I was like, he cried blood. Like he went and rested. There were things that he did that we do. And it's like he created those emotions for a reason. Like we're not supposed to suppress them or not feel them.
Welcome to the Love Your Brand podcast. If you're looking for real conversations with real people, you're the right place. Let's go!
Let's go. Welcome to the Love Your Brand show. And let me go ahead and stop it there. So you know. Welcome, Miss Rhonda Velez.
Rhonda Velez.
Flows off your tongue well.
Velez. Okay. California native, now living in Nashville, Tennessee. She's a mom, a wife, and a business entrepreneur. She's the founder of the Tiana Project, an organization dedicated to supporting parents dealing with neonatal or early infant loss. As a savvy businesswoman, author, and podcast host, Rhonda empowers women to find success and grow, helping them find their identity and purpose beyond financial achievements. Her journey, driven by compassion and resilience, reflects her commitment to making a positive impact both professionally and personally. Everyone, welcome Ms. Rhonda Velez.
Velez, you'll get it.
Rhonda, thanks for joining us today.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much for having me today.
We're so excited to have you.
I'm super excited to be here. I mean, this is really cool. I'm not gonna lie.
Thank you.
Cool. He's got this is fancy in here.
We're trying, I promise.
It's so fancy.
Baby steps. It's hard because everything costs money, so you want to do everything at once. It's like, we need to wrap it. We need to do it. It's like, hold on, slow your roll. You got to crawl before you can walk.
Yeah, this is a cool spot, guys.
But we appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, so we're excited to have you today.
Thank you.
You have quite the portfolio, resume, bio, whatever you want to call it. Sounds like you have your hands in it a lot.
I do have my hands in a lot. And sometimes I wonder how I do it all, but it's all fun stuff. So, do what you love, right?
Amen. So you are on the Love Your Brand podcast.
Yes.
Our personal brands, do what you love.
Yep.
I love that. That's awesome.
Absolutely.
Now all right. So Jason, as you read it off, California native, born and raised in California?
Born and raised in California. Yep.
Northern, Southern?
Northern California. So the Bay Area.
Yeah.
Huge 49er fan. I got to shout that out.
Oh, man. Yeah. All right. Okay.
Yeah, huge. Not the Raiders, though, but the 49ers for sure.
I have Jerry Rice's rookie card, 49ers. So I'm hoping that's my retirement.
Yes.
Don't think it will be, though. How long did you live out there?
Well, my whole life. So I'm not going to tell. How old am I? So a long time.
I did not ask that.
Like 40 plus years, let's just say 40 plus years. I lived in California, and then almost 3 years ago, we really felt like a tug from God that we needed to move to Nashville. My husband got transferred here. We kind of risked it all and said, let's go, and came out. Actually, it's been, 3 years today that we were here putting a down payment on a house. So we literally came out here just to look, and we found a lot. Loved it. And we were signing docs as we were getting on the plane to go back home. So it's been 3 years. So it's been,
Wow. And how's the transition been? How do you like it out here compared to California?
I love it. We were just saying the humidity is a little crazy today. So that I'm not quite used to, but I did live in a part of Northern California that was really hot. It was also the garlic capital of the world. So if you've ever heard of Gilroy, California, that's where your garlic comes from.
I've heard of that. Yeah.
That's where I'm from. So it's not terribly different, but I love the people here. I love the culture here. I'm loving it.
It's totally different. I think over the last couple of years, just with everything that's going on globally, there have been a lot of people that moved from California to Nashville.
I was just going to say that. I feel like
it's booming.
Every
person is from California here.
I know. I'm pretty much my whole neighborhood's from California. Maybe except 2 people.
Wow.
Yeah.
And we get the people, so we're in North Carolina, and I can't remember what they call them, but the people from up north, they drive down to Florida, and then they're going back up. They don't make it all the way back, and they settle in North Carolina. What do they call them? You know what I'm talking about? Maybe Sam can find that out if he's listening. What do they call the people that drive down to Florida, then they go back up north, and they stop in North Carolina? Google that and figure it out for us.
Drifters. I don't know.
It's something. It's going to drive me bonkers.
Nomads.
Maybe. No, it's going to drive me bonkers.
I think you're talking about seasonally. They shift. They go
they're
up north.
what do they call them? Birds, right?
Yes.
No.
No, what is it? Now that's going to bug me.
I feel like it was half something. I don't know.
Snowbirds?
But no, maybe? I don't know.
Snowbirds.
That's why Sam's going to look it up. So
I don't know.
We'll task that out.
I'm not that old yet. I don't know what it's like to be a snowbird.
Right.
But I like North Carolina.
I like North Carolina too. You know, in Charlotte area, it's very similar to here.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like I used to travel a lot for previous jobs and, you know, go to New York, go to San Francisco, all these places and just concrete jungles. And then when I would land in Charlotte, it's like the green, the lush, you know, all that.
Yeah.
Same thing here.
That's the
Love
one
it.
thing. Yep. That's the one thing it's so green year round. I'm not used to it. It's like California, it's green for like 3 months, maybe when it's raining for maybe 2 seconds and then it goes brown real fast. So I do love this area.
Yeah. Now you mentioned your husband, y'all came out here. He got relocated.
Mm-hmm.
Whole family. You have kids as well,
I
right?
do. I have a 26-year-old daughter. I had to think how old she was. She relocated. She owns her own social media agency.
Very cool.
And so she was like, I have nothing here, so I'm going too. And then my youngest was actually a senior in high school when we moved here, which that was my biggest wrestle with God.
Totally.
I was like, oh, okay, God, you're asking me to do this, but she's a senior in high school. I mean, California was still kind of shut down. So she was able to do kind of online school and she was able to graduate with her class. So that worked out really well. And then my parents moved here 2 weeks after we did. So
wow.
Yeah.
Were they out there with you?
They were living in the same town as me. They put their house up for sale. Kind of crazy story. My dad actually ended up with COVID right before we moved. We thought he was going to die.
Oh, wow.
And he came through, made it, and
Amen.
moved here. So yeah, they're here with me. So pretty much everybody, my whole family's here.
That's
Whole
awesome.
family. Nice.
You close with, I would think you're very close with your family if they're
Yeah.
moving with you.
Yeah, my mom and my parents were very, very close. So grew up in ministry. So we traveled a lot together. My dad ran Teen Challenge. Have you ever heard of Teen Challenge? Yeah. So he ran Teen Challenge for 25 years. So we used to travel. He would preach. I would sing. You know, my brother and I kind of joke. We were like the circus animals. It was like, what do you need us to do? Do you need to sing that song after you preach? Okay, here we go. So,
amazing.
yeah. So we're super, super, super tight. And just recently, my mother-in-law and stepfather-in-law just moved here. They're actually living with us right now.
Wow.
Until their house is done. So my husband's mom is here. And yeah, so we keep, recruiting them. And then I'm like, no more, Tennessee's full.
I'm like, where is everybody going?
I know. I love it out here. It's an amazing place. All right. So your husband got relocated for his job, but you're working in, like we said, your hands are in a ton of things right now. So what exactly are you doing?
Yeah. So my real job, like I like to say, is I actually have worked in the insurance industry for 29 years, kind of fell into that accidentally. I was working for my dad at his rehab. And I always say, I think he was trying to like discourage me from working in, drug rehabilitation because he put me in the home with the people who were pregnant and addicted. So the Crisis Pregnancy Center. It's a really, really hard place to be, but I learned a lot. My degree is in addiction studies. So I spent a lot of time studying that. I've always loved, learning about your brain and your body and how all of that works together. But I needed a job. So I went and took a temporary position as a receptionist to the receptionist. So I wasn't even the receptionist. I was like the girl at the front door that was like, through the double doors to your left is the receptionist.
You got a great voice and a nice smile for that.
Yeah,
so
the guy was like, okay, yeah, no problem. So this man came in and he was like, do you want to learn about the business? And I said, sure. And he goes, I'll hire you. So he hired me, kind of taught me everything I needed to know. And I kind of, worked my way up the ranks in the business. And so, it's been my passion as far as like helping people in a space that's really super confusing because half of the people that buy insurance don't know what a deductible or an out-of-pocket maximum is. So, so it makes it nice for me to be able to help them and guide them, but they become friends along the way because I'm pretty much on the wholesaler side. Yeah.
So you, in that space, I mean, you're in touch with people, a lot of people, and over 29 years, I mean, that's a lot of, I see opportunity, because I mean, when you get to build a relationship with somebody, you really get to hear their story. And I know that's something you're passionate about is helping people share their stories. What's one of your favorite things to stay in an industry that long, to be that tenured, you have to like it for some reason. So what are some of the reasons why you like it?
Oh gosh. I think because as a woman, the industry was very male dominated when I entered in, and it was very, I was the only Hispanic woman as well. So it was challenging. Yet the leaders that I had that were mentoring me were just so great about like telling me each step I should take. I would go to them. I had one woman, she was amazing. Her name was Becky, and she has since passed, but she was just always like, hey, like I would do it this way, or maybe you should think about this. She kind of played devil's advocate for me when I would get into situations that I wasn't sure about. And so I don't know. I just had a lot of really great mentors, and being in that business and it being so small, it was really something that I was able to be a mom and a wife. I worked a lot from home before working from home was a thing.
Yeah.
So it was good. My kids really never knew daycare because I was always really available to be able to pick them up or take care of them. So that was one of the things that kind of kept me in the industry. But the biggest part of my story was in 2002 when my daughter had a heart condition at birth and passed away. I was in the industry, and 6 weeks after I had her, I went back to work and I found my severance package letter on the photocopy machine. I had helped an insurance broker who had I'd gone off from my mentor, and I had worked for this man and I was helping him build his business. And he just, I guess, couldn't handle the fact that my daughter had passed away, told me he thought I needed some more time. And so he laid me off. And that's kind of when I was like, okay, God, like, I'm not sure what you want me to do. Like I've done everything right. Like I've served you my whole life. I've, done church. I really felt like it was a check mark system with God. Like I really felt like, hey, like Rhonda, you've done all these things right, so you should have this life. It was such a misconception of the way that God sees things. And so I went through this whole journey of kind of self-discovery and realizing I didn't work for probably in the business for probably 2 years. I took a little bit of time off. And it was a hard season.
Wow. I'm so sorry for your loss there. You and I are wired very similar, just the way you're talking about that checklist.
Yeah.
Check these items off. And, when God kind of challenges us to where we want things to go this way, and they don't look that way.
Yeah.
So those can be scary, but we know he's good every time. And here you are today. And now you're, as we shared in this bio, there's a lot of people that you're helping, a lot of women, through your program that have experienced similar things, as well as just a lot of individuals, that as you've shared, like through the insurance business, to where you start to develop those relationships and they start to trust you, and then things start unfolding. And before you know it, like I've had so many business opportunities, and in my past, I'm sitting at a bar after a corporate dinner, and people are crying. We're going through traumas and wounds from their childhood, and they're just letting it all out. And so it's like, here on the Love Your Brand podcast, we're offering marketing and business advice to our listeners hear this, and just hearing stories like yours. And there's a guy that we follow, and he talks about these relationships, and to where there's 3 components of every relationship, from a marketing perspective. Number one is curiosity, to where like you're with these people and you ask these questions and they're curious, like, Rhonda, tell me more. Then you can enlighten them through content, conversations. And then at the third step is they trust you. And have you found, like with what you do, like once they get to trust you, kind of the relationship is built, are people starting to pour out some of this stuff, that are sharing? You've talked about some of these traumas and wounds that you're experiencing with yourself and other people. Like, is that happening with these people you're coming in contact with?
For sure. I mean, I've been really honest about my journey and my story. And because the insurance industry seems big from the outside, but it's a very, very tight-knit community. And so after I went through that, so many people would come to me and be like, hey, Rhonda, I know you've been through this. Do you have any suggestions? I mean, I still to this day get people within the industry going, hey, like, my friend lost her child. How can you help me? Like, what do you want? I always say, don't send flowers. That's like my big thing, because flowers just remind me of funerals when you're going through the loss. So a lot of times I'll give them suggestions on, hey, this is what you need to do. Don't fix it, because I could write a book on things you don't say after you've lost a child. People want to they inherently want to make you feel better, but it ends up becoming this, like, then they can't back out of it. And then they just keep talking. You're like, wait, hold on.
I know.
It's okay. We don't have to talk about it anymore. So they're almost more uncomfortable with it than you are. Yeah. And so, as I've built relationships, not only in business, but outside of business, I've really found that like our story really matters. And for me, it was really a pivotal point, not only with my relationship with Jesus, but also understanding like who I was, who he created me to be, and how my story had impacted me in the long run. Like I was finding myself not doing things in business because I was holding back. I was so scared that I was going to get hurt or rejected, especially after losing a job. I never realized that it had that much impact. But when I did go back into the corporate space, I found myself like very, very intimidated and not really able to step fully into what I believe that God, called me to. So I started studying like story work and understanding our stories. And that even just gave me a greater place to understand my clients in both spaces, both, on the podcast space and as an author, as a leader in, with women and in insurance.
Wow. And you coach others as
well,
right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
so
I do some coaching on the side.
Has there been some crossover to where you meet somebody in insurance and then they become like a coaching client?
Yeah, I have one gal that I adore, and she'll call me and she's like, Rhonda, man, I need to get this out. And we kind of walk through it, and I don't really fix anything for her. I'm really just holding that space for her so she can kind of make the decision. Because I think a lot of times we think we have to say something or give advice, but a lot of times it's just, let me listen to you. And then once we start talking out loud, we're like, oh, wait, now I see it. And they kind of end up fixing themselves. Like they're doing that work already. So I think getting more training to do that was really important for me. So, I spent the last almost 4 years getting trained as a narrative trauma coach, which that space is starting to open up a little bit in the business world, which it wasn't before, and in church. I mean, nobody talks about trauma in church, right? We're just supposed to like pray it away or throw a scripture on it or, whatever they might say. I'm going to preach because I am super passionate about that. Like, I feel like, especially in the church space, because I grew up there, all things work together for those who love God. Oh yeah, they do. But when your kid dies and you have to bury them, it doesn't feel that way. Yeah. And so our hearts need to be tended to and held. And I think churches are starting to learn to do that. They're starting to learn to go into those hard places of people's stories. And then you've got the corporate world side of it too, where they're like, well, this is work, you keep it separate, but you've got someone going through a massive divorce behind the scenes. Yeah, right. And how do you hold it all together in a corporate space?
You're supposed to put a mask on and act like I'm good.
Yeah, or power through it.
Right.
And then everything's falling apart and you're winning trophies and awards and top salesperson and all these things. It looks good on the outside, but it's a mess. Yeah. So really starting to work from the inside out.
Wow. So I've never heard it that said narrative trauma. What exactly is narrative trauma? So for somebody who's never heard that.
Yeah. So narrative trauma, basically you go back into your story and find where the places of harm were. And then we kind of engage those places. So a lot of my training that I did, the thing is you can't take people further than you're willing to take yourself. And so we immersed ourselves in that. So in one of the sessions, we had to write a 600-word essay about ourselves as a child. Because it's usually right around adolescence where our identity starts to shift and change. And, I don't know, Inside Out 2 just came out. Did you guys?
I didn't see
I
it,
just saw it yesterday. And it was funny because, spoiler alert, so don't listen to this if you don't want to know. But one of the things she starts puberty. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's so true, because that's when our identities are really starting to shape and be formed. And so what happens to us sometimes, like for me, it was 5th grade on the playground, which seemed so insignificant. Like it seemed like such a dumb story. I brought it in and I was like, this is the dumbest story ever. I'm sure people have more trauma than their 5th grade, falling in the playground. But what I found was a lot of that narrative started there. And then it also took from some of the childhood things that I was a pastor's kid. I had a lot of performance issues. I had a lot of perfectionist issues. Yeah. And so I always felt like I had to be on. And I brought that into the workplace. I brought it into my marriage. I brought it in with my children, like all of these things that just all of a sudden become illuminated.
And is it safe to say that based on the short term I've known you, is it safe to say on the outside it looked like you were all composed and had it all together and everything was good? And inside you were just crumbling?
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of times I felt very alone, very rejected. My core wound is rejection, which is so funny because I got up on stages and sang and I, did very well in business and all these things, and people would look and would never know. But until I was able to actually name it and be like, man, this is where it hurts. And then as I started to name it, I started to see the unraveling of all the other little things in my life that I was like, oh my gosh, like I have just been living in this like world that isn't even who I truly am or who God created me to be. So that's why narrative trauma was such an enlightening thing for me, because I was like, man, like most of us walk around thinking that whatever happened to us in childhood didn't matter or it was fine. Like my parents went, not my parents, but your parents go through divorce. You're like, not a problem. It's okay. They're fine. We got through it.
Yeah, right.
But there's parts of that caused harm. And so where do you go from that?
Yeah, totally. So when you were going through that with your own stuff, somebody was facilitating, walking you through that?
Yeah.
Then you got kind of certified in that to be able to do to others?
Yes. Yeah. There's an organization called Freedom Movement. Wonderful woman named Carrie Scott Garcia. She does a certification program. And we started with level 1 and it went all the way through level 4, and then you graduate, and it takes you everything from just understanding your own story, holding space for other people. It truly is like a combination between personal development and, just educating yourself on understanding your own story.
Yeah. Wow. I've gone through quite a bit of inner healing, counseling, all those things. And sometimes, like you're saying, things would get brought up and they seem so small, in my past. And it's like, there can be nothing around that.
Yeah.
And then, a counselor would kind of take us there, because they always can see it, it's there's nothing there. Yeah. Okay, Jonathan, let's just see. And then before you know it, so much is there, because I think sometimes, and maybe it's not even that major trauma, like abuse or something like that, but just something enough to where your mindset, your belief, your identity was wired in, to where if your core wound, like you said. So if mine is, I don't have what it takes. And, because of that one event when I was 8 years old or 10 years old, and that affected everything in my life now, and to where I'm going into work and I'm striving to be a perfectionist. I'm striving to be performance-based acceptance. I have to do because I don't have what it takes unless I can do X, Y, Z. And it was like so enlightening for me. So anytime like I've gone through other sessions and goes back to like the same wound sometimes. It's like, I thought we fixed this. I thought we dealt with that. And you can see where it's kind of playing in your life.
Well, that's such a good point, because I saw this meme on Instagram the other day, and it says when you're working on your inner healing, and it's somebody running up the stairs and then they keep falling like off the staircase, because I don't think you ever like are complete. Like I've gone through all this training, and if I'm being honest, because we're going to be real honest here today, right? I had a major meltdown last week, and I was like, Rhonda, gosh darn it, haven't we come further than this? And then I remind myself, that's ridiculous. Like, you're human, you're going to have triggers, you're going to have things. I just know how to get out of it quicker now. Whereas before I would spiral and might be depressed or stay in bed for a really long period of time. Now I'm able to actually pop out of it a lot quicker, because I'm able to like go, wait a minute, that is not truth. And one of the things that I use a lot with my clients is I list like, what are the truths and what are the lies?
Yeah.
Because really a lot of what I truly believe that the enemy uses that against us, and that he'll keep telling us lies, and we keep hearing it, we keep hearing it, we
100%.
keep hearing it, right? And so we have to have ways to combat it. But you don't know that unless you've actually done some work on yourself.
100%.
And you never stop learning, right? And growing.
Yeah.
Like you said, you've had all this training, and then you found yourself, and you're like, dang it. Rhonda.
What did I do?
What is going on?
Well, we always want to think we're further, like
completely.
I already dealt with this,
with business, in the business world, entrepreneurs and brands in general, I think the key now is authenticity. And it's hard to have authenticity if you don't have any kind of source of your calling or your, direction, and you're not comfortable in your own skin. And dealing with all that trauma and those lies makes you uncomfortable. It makes you almost create a facade.
Yeah. And it's easy now to create a facade. We've
really
got
is.
all the social medias, and, you got people like, all this stuff, and you look at people and there's envy and there's all these things that come into play with it. And
like,
I want to look like I have it all together.
I want to work from Hawaii, on the laptop. And and make millions and have a beautiful life.
Right.
And, I can do it all in 24
Yes,
hours.
exactly.
Right.
What?
And social media is such a highlight reel of everybody's life.
Completely.
For the most part, we all post just the positive stuff, to where it looks like, again, that facade. Everything's great. My life's amazing. I'm on vacation,
Yeah.
And there's a few, depending on the community you surround yourself with, I follow people that have gone through struggle, that have gone through loss, that have gone through failure, that are really inspiring, motivating people that help me, And there's statistics that talk about children now with social media and the dangers of being introduced to it before a certain age, and just statistics of like suicide, mental health stuff, and all these things. Because, and on social media, there's such negativity. We had a guest on earlier, and we were just talking about how people, you just post, you're proud, you can just stand your belief on something.
Right.
And it's not even a controversial topic. And the people that come in are just awful in the comments going after it. And so these kids are just, growing up in an environment to where if they're on that all day long, as opposed to us growing up in the woods and in the creek and playing outside and life is great, there's trauma that's coming into that, which is so sad.
Yeah. And I think there's different pieces to it too, because when in my training, we worked on not only understanding our story, but we also worked on being in our own bodies, which is something that I don't feel the church is great at. I grew up in the, no sex till marriage, not that I'm condoning sex before marriage. I'm saying the no sex before marriage, what was the promise that you made and you had to sign it, the promise. No, where you had to put like I can't remember what it's called, but where you had to like sign a thing that you wouldn't. Yeah. What is where you would sign, sign a letter that basically said that you would stay pure in the purity culture. That's what it's called. Purity culture. Okay. Which is great. I do believe in that. However, we also don't talk that our bodies are changing. So some of the work that we did in story work was learning to be in our own bodies, learning to be able to feel like, oh my gosh, when I get anxious, like my stomach feels like it's on fire. Like I start to sweat. I have anxiety. Like, what does it feel like? And we did this she did this beautiful biblical meditation one day and we got done with it. And she was like, how does everybody feel? And I was like, I feel like I'm going to vomit. And she goes, oh, you're not used to being in your body. And I was like, oh my goodness. So now I know, like when I get like that, sometimes like I just have to put my hand on my heart or take a big breath or ground my feet, put my feet on the ground. Like, I know it all sounds so like, weird, that's weird stuff, but no, it isn't. We were meant to be in nature. We were meant to, be grounded. And I think that so often we forget that our bodies hold a lot of stress and a lot of tension. I don't know if you've ever heard of the book, The Body Keeps the Score.
I knew you were going to say that.
Yeah. That's a great book. It's kind of clinical, but it's such a great book 100%. Because it's so true. Like you wonder why we walk around with so much tension or, our shoulders ache and I noticed that when I started to release some of this, like some of the aches that I used to have in my body, I don't have anymore. And so that part of it as well, because in the corporate space, it's hustle culture, right? Hustle, 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 hustle. And I don't know. Over the last 6 months, I'm just like, I don't know that I believe in hustle culture. I don't know. I don't even know that it's biblical.
Right.
Like I believe that God rested, and I'm actually in a season of rest right now. And I wake up in the morning and I'm like, wow, I don't have a bunch of stuff to do. This is really weird. And it feels kind of good. Like, I'm like, okay, God, like right now you're just telling me to chill out. I'm going to do this today and then I'm going to go late tomorrow, and I watched a movie yesterday. I don't know what I'm going to do Thursday and Friday.
And that's okay.
It is. But you go on Instagram and everyone's, making $1 million and hustling. And you start to feel kind of guilty. Like, should I not be taking a nap at 3:00 in the afternoon while I'm in my season of rest?
You talk about naps. You're speaking his language over there.
Hey, I need a nap sometimes.
I love my naps.
It keeps me in my, my way, man.
Yep.
Absolutely. Well, the stuff that goes on emotionally and mentally, it has a physical effect on our body. They say there's so much scientific studies about stress, being the leading cause of disease. And exercise, it physically stresses your body. There's positive and negative stresses. But just the things we go through and how you start, like you said, your wrist and your everything.
Yeah.
We start to feel these things. And my daughter, I've tried, when early on, just the frustration, because she didn't get this or that and kind of a thing. And or got really upset, I'm like practicing the breathing.
Yeah.
There's different breathing techniques that truly work. They calm your nervous system down. And there are things that, I do for myself, and not even when I'm stressed, just slowing your heartbeat down, all these things. And so trying to incorporate that with my daughter to where, she doesn't just do what I say, but she actually sees daddy's doing this as well. And those things work 100%.
Yeah. And I mean, we start to cope when we don't deal with those kinds of things too. So then finding out like what your coping mechanism is.
Oh, yeah.
That's super important too, because, in the corporate space, there's a lot of like heavy drinking that happens because they're so stressed out that it's the only way to check out. And it's such an unhealthy way to check out. And so I would tell like a lot of my clients, I'm like, instead go for a walk, go for a run, get on your Peloton, like do something that is going to make you feel good. Take an ice bath. I'm a true believer in the ice bath. I'm all about it right now. But it's like, we don't know how to cope. So we just start doing other things to make us feel better.
Run away from it.
Only to make it worse.
Absolutely. Most of my career was in the corporate world. I used to travel a lot, and sadly, there's so many people I talked to, the only reason they traveled and wanted to travel was to get away from their spouse, get away from their kids. And because they were not going towards, things that needed to work and things where there was some tension about. We were driving up yesterday, the three of us, and listening to some stuff on marriage, some interviews and things, and talking about, how often, people, they run away from those things, just the coping mechanisms that you're talking to. And it always broke my heart hearing that on the road. It was like, man, go to your family.
I know.
Go to them. And I'm not saying I was perfect. I mean, there were times I ran away, it's like, I'm not dealing with that. I'm going over here and whatever my choice, of coping was. But I mean, we're all, the temptation is there.
Yeah.
And like we were talking about, you never will have arrived. Like, never coping again. I healed it, got rid of that trauma, because then it comes in. It's like, man, we got to go here again, counselor. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of the other things I had to learn was repairing relationships with even like my own children, especially after you've had a child that's passed away. My oldest was 4, which seems like, she probably didn't remember it. At the time that my other daughter died, she was 4. And so she had to deal with a whole lot of her own I was just kind of checked out. It checked out. Like I couldn't even process what it was going on. And so in my own grief from losing my daughter and losing my job, there were things that my daughter Nina had to deal with, as me with a mom not being present. And because I had lost my job, my husband was working 4 jobs at the time.
Wow.
Like he was literally just doing everything to make ends meet. And so there was a moment, my daughter actually went through the trauma therapy with me. She also graduated as a narrative trauma coach as well. And the very last day, I really felt the Holy Spirit tell me, you just need to go and tell her you're sorry. And so I did. I just went to her and I said, honey, I am so sorry that I did not hold your heart well, that my hands were heavy, that I wasn't kind to you or said words that were not right to you. And she just started crying and she's like, thank you, Mama, for saying that. And that was probably one of the most beautiful things. And I can say that our relationship has even changed. We had a good relationship before, but I feel like our relationship is it's so honest now. Like if I've crossed a line, she has no problem with being like, hey mom, like that was kind of harsh. And I can take it with being able to say, you know what it was, instead of being like, well, I'm the parent, like, don't talk to me like that. I'm able to actually take it and go, yeah, you were right. You actually were right. And so our relationship has gotten to be very, very honest. And my husband also did 2 levels of the trauma therapy. So our relationship is starting to shift and change as well as he's delved deeper into his story and his grief and his loss. We've been able to communicate better. And that's 28 years. Like it's been a long road. Like I always tell him, I'm like, if you had told me that I was going to go through all these things being married to you, I would have been like the runaway bride. I would have run away.
Well, I think every one of us would never sign up for the things we signed up for had we known that their journey was going to be on.
Yeah.
There's like a chart that goes around on social media. It's for entrepreneurship, life in general. It's like we expect this linear line that goes, from here to here. The actual journey is like up, down, mountain, valley, underground, all this stuff. Yeah. And it's so true. But I think everything we go through, I think it's really true. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger.
Yeah, it does.
And, there's things I really wish I wouldn't have gone through. But if you do the work and the wounds that it brought up, the muscles that it strengthened, it'll truly prepare you for what's next. You mentioned earlier, I want to come back to it, talking about podcasting. You have a podcast or 2 as well, right? 2
podcasts, yeah.
Talk to us about that.
So 24 Karat Conversations, that originally started in 2019. That was kind of one of my really good girlfriends, she had wanted to start a podcast. I wanted to start a podcast. So we said, let's do it together. And then 2020 hit, which was crazy because that was really like our only outlet to be able to talk to people. And it was great. It was an awesome time. But we really created that podcast so that women could have real honest conversations. Because I feel like women in particular tend to put up a facade. Like, I don't want anybody to know that I'm going through this. So we really wanted to kind of break down those barriers. I also, when I was going through the loss of my daughter, Job 23:10, which says, for when he has tested me, I will emerge as pure gold, was one of the
24 karat.
Yeah, 24 karat. So that's how 24 karat was kind of formed.
Love that.
And then when I moved, actually, it's funny, 5 years ago today, we launched our very first podcast of 24 karat.
No way.
I was here in Tennessee visiting my brother when we did it. But my girlfriend, she had some projects she wanted to do. So at the end of 2021, we kind of went our separate ways. And so I took over 24 karat completely. So I do that. And
Is that still live?
It is still live. Yeah. We have some wonderful women that have been on it, kind of shifting it a little bit more towards the business aspect, moving towards the future. And then PK podcast, that happened. My brother happened to be visiting in California, and we were talking kind of about all of our stories of being pastors' kids. And I go, you want to record something? He's like, yeah, let's do it. So we just went into my office and recorded our first podcast. And that one is really fun too, because we've had some incredible guests on there as well.
And so what, if I was listening to PK, what was it? PK,
Recovering PK podcast.
Recovering PK podcast.
Pastor kids.
So what kind of things will we be hearing on there?
We do talk a lot about trauma. We've had guests like, John Deloney on. We've had pastors. We've had local pastors that have been on. We just kind of talk about like misconceptions of Christianity and how it affected us as pastors' kids. And I always find myself very fortunate because I did grow up with a lot of pastors' kids who lost their faith along the way. My mom was just a solid rock. She just always kind of grounded us. So we never got caught up in the spin of being, in pastoral ministry. But so many pastors' kids lose their way. And so we just kind of wanted to bring it back to help them understand that God is good, even when things don't go the way we planned. Because like I said before, I thought that I had a special ticket to heaven because I'd done it all right. Right. And
checklist. You were crushing it.
Yeah, I was crushing the checklist.
Totally.
Until, God kind of stirred it up a little bit. And that's when both my brother and I talk about it. Like, we had to really decide, like, this is our faith. Like, we're not getting to heaven on my parents' coattails. Like, we've got to get to heaven on our own. And we really need to have a relationship with Jesus. And so we talk a lot about that on the podcast as well.
Are you and your brother close?
We are really close.
So how's that working with like a sibling on a project like that?
Oh, he's a comedian. And so sometimes
like truly?
He's not, but he should be, because he literally is the only person that can make me laugh so hard, like that I would pee my pants. He's so funny. He's just really funny. And so he's really fun to do the project with. He's just so all over the place. Him trying to pin him down to do a podcast is what's hard. We always make fun of him because I'm like, you're so busy. He's like, well, I work in an office. And I go, I work too. Right. I'm working too. What are you talking about? And I'm a mom and I'm a wife and I do this. And he's like, well, I'm busy. So, but it's super fun. I mean, it's kind of, really, honestly, it's like the podcast that's so casual. Like, we just do it. Sometimes we'll just be sitting in the kitchen at Sunday. We do Sunday dinner every Sunday night. My parents, my brother, my kids, we all do it. And sometimes we'll be like, want to go record a podcast? Like, we'll get something. Yeah. Start talking on a topic. And I'm like, we need to record that. And so
I think that's what makes podcasts so appealing to people, why it took off. Because like in the past, you have like influencers or these gurus or experts, and they're up on stage teaching something, and we don't feel like they're up there. I'm not good enough. I don't have what they have, kind of a thing. And podcasts, we just bring people in, can be, I say a nobody, meaning just, they're not unknown, right. But they're not a nobody because everybody's somebody. Or anybody, and you just watch the conversation and we flop over our words, we mess up, people are like, oh, it's just real life. Right. They're relatable, and you can learn so many nuggets through just a candid conversation instead of having a script of, all right, we want to knock out boom, 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 boom. And that's why, like with this, with Love Your Brand, we just want to hear stories and share, and invite people in to learn about you.
Yeah.
We don't over edit. Our first
We don't edit at all.
podcast, we laughed for probably 30 minutes. Literally, we laughed. He messed up my name.
That was the one I called him the wrong name.
He called me the wrong name.
Homeboy comes to my wedding, called him the wrong name.
And everybody over here is just looking at us with deer in the headlights, right? Open eyes. We have 3 people here.
We forgot to cut the microphones on.
Forgot to cut the mics on. And we're just laughing uncontrollably.
I think that's the best part of it, though.
It was so awesome.
When you listen to it back.
Yeah.
I also think that there's something very special when you leave this part of it to God, because we've done so many podcasts where I'm like, I know that was horrible. I don't even want to listen to it back, and I'll get it back from my sound engineer and he'll be like, that was great. And I'm like, really? Because I think that was all. And then I'll listen to it and I'll be like, oh my goodness. I had no idea that the conversation we had was so awesome.
Right.
So I think when you edit it too much, it becomes
right.
You're trying to make it perfect, and nothing's perfect. We all know that.
And that's exactly my point. It's leave the real life in, and I mean, I can't remember what we were talking about before we actually officially went live today, but it's sometimes we take that and create a blooper reel when we're laughing, put it at the end of the episode, post-production,
So awesome.
this is what we do, and this is what it's all about. Because I mean, laughter is medicine.
It is.
There's a statistic. I'm a big stat guy, and it talks about 1 minute of laughing boosts your immune system for 24 hours. 1 minute of anger, weakens it by a certain amount, for 24 hours. And I mean, laughter truly is medicine. It's a gift God gave us.
Emotions.
Yeah.
God gave us emotions.
And I'm like you. I'm like you. It takes a lot to make me laugh. Something I just don't find funny. But when I get with Jason, he'll give me a look. And then before you know it, we can't talk.
Yeah.
We had it last night. Sam got to experience it.
Yeah. We've been there a few times on PK podcasts where I'm like, we have to stop for a second because I can't.
Are y'all video or just audio?
Well, we should be video. I should do video for
Right.
sure because it would be really funny. But back in the day when you were growing up in church, you guys both grew up in church?
Yes.
Okay. You remember Carmen?
Yeah, the singer?
The singer Carmen?
No,
Yeah.
I don't.
Oh, he was very, very dramatic.
I
And
didn't
we
listen
had
to him,
we
but
had
I know.
a whole probably 15 minutes of just cracking up about Carmen and, or the Left Behind movies that they used to make us watch.
Kirk Cameron.
When we were the old ones, the
Old,
really old
original
ones, where the girl was running in the field and she had been left behind. And you're just I thought for sure I was going to go to hell if I watched a horror movie,
Right.
That's the kind of stuff we talk about
Yeah.
because it's so true. We're oh, we've got all these check boxes and
Scare you to get to heaven.
it scare me into heaven. Yes, for sure. So
Right.
yeah, that's kind of where we go every time.
I mean, I was brought up in church. It was more every Sunday, my mother would make me go to Sunday school, right? And so it wasn't until recently, I'd say about 10 years ago, that I truly had a relationship and really started discovering who Jesus was. And even up to a few years ago, I feel like I've just grown so much spiritually, learning more about who Jesus was in his everyday life, what he experienced in his everyday life. He was a rabbi.
Yeah.
He celebrated certain events. He walked a certain way. He did things for a certain reason. And it's a lot of things that in traditional Christian environment that they kind of skip over. They kind of haze over.
Right.
Who was Jesus?
Yeah.
They'll
It's like the picture that you see over, the dining room table of Jesus.
Right.
That's
Yes.
him. His
And
hair's flowing.
Right.
I'm geeking
Everybody
out.
knows what Jesus looks like.
Exactly.
I go to a Christian church. I call it with a Hebraic flair, right? So we really get into it about the why, about what was going on at the time, right? About the reasonings. And I find myself I put myself in that timeline and I just geek out because I'm just looking at everything that's going on. I'm like, ooh, I get it. And it makes so much sense to me now when prior I was trying to connect too many dots.
Right.
Now I can connect the dots. And
yeah. And I think when you think about Jesus, we were talking about emotions, right? So we think of Jesus of having it all together and not having it because he was perfect. He didn't have these emotions. He didn't have these feelings. And so as I studied trauma, I was he cried blood. Like he went and rested. He like, there were things that he did that we do. And it's like, he created those emotions for a reason. Like we're not supposed to suppress them or not feel them or mask them or, try and not, take a ton of medication so we can't feel it all. I feel like, I will say my doctor, after my daughter had passed away, it was about 6 or 8 months after. And I told her, I'm just not in a good place. And I really would like to go on medication. And I'm a total advocate for mental health and medication, but she just said, you actually need to feel everything that you were feeling right now. And that was probably the best piece of advice I've ever had from a physician, because a lot of physicians will just write that medication and say, yeah, numb out. Right. And I'm so glad she did, because it really gave me a chance to kind of process through those emotions. And I think we don't even allow God to be in the emotion with us. Like even in the anger emotion, he was angry. He flipped tables. I mean, it was before Teresa Giudice. He had already flipped the table.
He didn't sin.
He
that's
did,
cool.
yes.
I think with that, you're spot on, Rhonda. So often we take the humanity of Jesus away. Like we forget about that, and to where it's really no different than you and I, except that he didn't sin.
Yep.
And so the humanity aspect, when somebody told me that one time, I was like, oh my goodness, like if you look at him through that lens and see how he lived his life, it's completely different, because he did teach us these things. He cried blood, Lord, please take this cup of suffering away from me 3 times. I don't want to endure this pain, but I'm willing to do it.
Right.
Kind of a thing. So if we look at a model like that, it's like, man, the blueprint's laid out, kind of a thing. But what do? We numb out, we cope out. And it's like, that road over there looks painful and scary. And so I know I'm supposed to go that way, but I'm going to go this way because that doesn't look as scary. I'm not going to get hurt as much over there. And I mean, we're all guilty of it, and that way it's delayed pain, because it's like, I can get away from it for a little bit, but then it's going to come back, or the things that I avoided, they never go away. Never go away.
And trust. I think trust is something that I had to also learn. Like I thought I trusted Jesus. And then as I began to do the work, I was like, wow, I don't really think I trust him. That's kind of crazy. Like I grew up in church. You would think I had that figured out. And even today, I will say trust is still a place of, I have to really be intentional with going, okay, God, I trust you with this, because trust was just something that I felt that I could not trust him. Like I felt like you don't know, you don't know what I'm going through. And so as God became more human to me, I was able to really kind of lean into that. And I do think that plays into every aspect of my life,
Amen. I think one last topic before we close out today, with your daughter's loss, you created the Tiana Project.
Yeah, the Tiana Project.
Tell us about that.
Yeah. So the Tiana Project was created. It's so interesting because while I had that time off, again, it's funny because now looking back, I'm like, man, God, thank you for that time off, right? Like, even though that was very painful and to lose my job after such a great loss, I started, first I would go to the cemetery, like probably every day for the first few months. And when you go to, they have something called Babyland, and you'd go there, and if you didn't have a gravestone, a lot of parents would make gravestones out of styrofoam, and they would put like little, stickers that you could put on them with their name. But what would happen is that the cemetery landscapers would come in and they would take them and put them at the tree every week, because you can't have that there. So when they mowed the lawn, they didn't want anything that wasn't, in the ground. So I would go to the cemetery and I would watch these parents, go to the tree and pick up their stuff and kind of try and put it back together for that week until the next week where they went and took it away. And so I came home one day and I told my husband, I said, I think that we should buy gravestones for babies who've passed away. And he was like, awesome. I'm working 4 jobs and you don't have a job. So I'm not sure. I'm barely paying the bills here at this moment. And I was like, well, no, I'll figure something out. So I ended up making body scrubs, lotions. I was making soap out of my kitchen, selling them at craft fairs. And then if a parent, I was putting little notes on the cemetery plots that had them. And I was like, if you need help with buying a gravestone, I can help you. And so we were able to help so many families purchase gravestones. But I mean, one of my biggest passions with the project is in 2019, right before COVID, we had purchased something called a cuddle cot. Do you know what that is? So a cuddle cot is this unit where after a baby dies, they can put the baby in this unit and it keeps their temperature at a perfect temperature. So the parents can actually grieve and process. They found that in lower income communities, what would happen is mothers would come in, their babies might pass away. They would leave the baby at the hospital and the baby becomes a baby doe. And so then they have to dispose of the babies. So they didn't have any burial. So this unit actually allows the mom to bond with the baby. So a lot of times they would come back and plan funeral services or be able to get the resources that they need. And so I really wanted to get a cuddle cot in California in our community, but because of COVID, it was shut down. So my husband, when we moved here, he was going through delayed grief. He was really having a hard time that she was staying in California. We were coming here. And I just really felt like, you know, babe, maybe the cuddle cot's supposed to be in Tennessee. Maybe it's not supposed to be here in California, because we've tried to get it in. We haven't had any open doors at all. So we brought the cuddle cot all the way with us from California. And it was probably a few months after I had been here, I connected with this woman who connected me with Nashville General. And Nashville General happens to be a lower income hospital. And the lady called me and she says, this has secretly been on our list for years. And we would love to have the cuddle cot. When do you want to present it? And she goes, can you present it on March 18th? Well, that happened to be what would have been my daughter's 20th birthday. Mm-hmm. And so we were able to present this cuddle cot to the hospital. And so this unit is there in honor of her name. I was able to give them some of my books. I was able to give them some resources. So really just the Tiana Project, it encompasses just support. Like it's not anything super deep or not, what do you need? What do you need from me right now that I can help you with?
That's awesome.
Yeah, sure.
That just encourages me so much. One of the lowest times in your life, and something that brings such passion and fulfillment to you and so many lives that are being impacted through one of the hardest things you've ever had to walk through.
Yeah. And God is, I just want to say that no matter what, God is good, even if, and I know that's so hard when you're going through a really hard process, but I've looked back and every time I go through something really difficult, I look back and I go, man, God every single time he's just done some great things in that season when I was like, I'm broken. I don't know where to go from here.
Yeah. And even all those emotions, there's nothing wrong with those emotions. Mm-hmm. And it's like grief. They say the 7 stages of grief or something, denial, anger, all those things. And to where being a parent is allowing me to learn, so much I thought I knew in the past, was nothing compared to once I became a parent. And when my daughter has those big emotions and teaching her, it's okay to be angry about that. And teaching, what's not okay is if you do X, Y, Z out of that anger and just learning those things. And I just think, those emotions are such a key for us, because my temptation is to muscle through things and put my head down. And so often it's like, God, the temptation is forget about a step ahead of God instead of letting him lead. Yeah. And then before you know it, a couple of weeks go by, I've been just muscling my own strength. And I'm like, I'm fried. Yeah. I'm discouraged. I'm frustrated. I'm done. And he's like, well, I'm here. Why'd you go do it by yourself? Exactly. I'm like, oh, okay. Yeah. So it's like every day I think I take 1 step forward, 2 steps backwards. Yeah. I'm just do.
You said something pretty powerful. It's sometimes it's just they need someone to listen.
Yeah.
I think in today's world, that's the reason why I even started the podcast.
Get a little closer to your mic.
To create an environment to listen. Mm-hmm. I was always captivated by people's stories and what made them tick and why they were who they were. And, and even though we may have differences, it could be political, it could be viewpoints, it could be values, that there still is a way to communicate and have a relationship with someone and listen to them and show respect and have that conversation. And I think now is more important than ever that we do. Yeah. That we open these doors. Because what we find most of the time is that we got more in common. Yeah. And we don't.
Yeah. When you sit and listen to someone's story, it just gives you a completely different perspective of who they are. And I also think that when you've been through a lot of life, we all kind of want an easy life, but at the same time, it's like you gain so much empathy when you've gone through really hard things. I wouldn't have had empathy for parents who have lost children if I hadn't have gone through it, and so my heart grieves when I know that someone is going through something or grieving and being able to sit and listen and not fix and just be like, I'm so sorry that you're going through that. and I'm here.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's really all anyone really wants, because you can't fix it. When someone is going through something really difficult, there's really nothing that you can do to fix it.
That's good. So, Rhonda, if any of our listeners have experienced loss like you have, where would you send them? Is there a website, a resource where they could go?
So my website's being redone right now, but you can go to rhondavelez.com. I'm also on socials at Reality of Life 02. And you can just, there's, contact forms on there. You can DM me. Yeah, I'm more than happy. If you need coaching, I'm available for that. So
awesome. Well, we will drop that in the show notes as well for this episode when it drops. But thank you so much for making the time today, sharing your story. This was incredible.
I love Matthew McConaughey.
I know, right?
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you.
Give us a little.
Give us a
all right.
It's so good.
Love it.
No, but Rhonda, you truly are a beacon of hope and a beacon of light. And we honor you for the work that you're doing, for the loss that you endured, and how you're persevering through it.
Thank you so much, guys. You're the best. And I love your pink pillows.
Well, thank you. Thank you. They're hot magenta.
Hot magenta pink.
When you get into brand, I think on the Pantone color scheme, I think there's 260,000 colors. And so there's a specific hex code. You get into all the marketing, branding aspects of it. There's like a 6-digit code for that hot magenta.
I like it.
So
it's very, very manly.
I think these were for you.
Thank you.
Very manly.
They really pressed me. They really pressed me to get an accent color.
Because he went about 10 years with just black and white for the brand and needed a little pop of color. Yeah. So this last year, we just introduced this hot magenta.
I love it. You guys are the best.
Oh, You're the best. Thank you so much. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you next time.
See you next time. Peace. Bye.
Thanks for listening and joining us on the Love Your Brand podcast. Stay tuned for the next episode, and remember, share the love.